Okay, so we can all agree that expensive games suck, right? Well, it depends who you're asking. If there's a game you want to collect that's expensive and you don't have it, then that sucks. However, if somebody already owns a game, then they may not be bothered by the price of the game being high. In fact, they might actually be glad the price is so high if they already have it. I understand that gamers will say they just wish as many people as possible could play the game. But I think if they're being honest, there's a part of them that enjoys seeing the price of their game rise, similar to somebody watching stocks they've purchased go up. I should point out that when I refer to the value of these games, I'm generally talking about the average selling price on eBay, since that seems to be the most common universal place that everybody can find a given game. In some ways, retro games having value legitimizes the hobby, right? I mean, if these games could regularly be found just sitting in bins at the thrift store for 5 cents a piece, it would send the message that nobody gives a crap about this stuff. Don't get me wrong, I would love to find retro games for that cheap, but I understand it's just not likely given their popularity. Of course, there's been some nice measures made to combat against this. For example, these mini consoles are a great way to be able to play these games. Pretty much any alternative that allows you to play these games without having to own the original hardware is going to help decrease demand. Basically, if these games are available to play in ways outside of collecting, then the only people who will be left to collect the original hard copies are collectors. It's rare, but there are certain games that can pretty much only be played with original hardware. There's a lot of Sega Saturn games that are good examples of this. The Sega Saturn is a really difficult system to emulate, at least compared to a lot of other systems. And to make things even more tricky, a lot of these games sold very few copies. Of course, this happened with games on other consoles as well, and one of the biggest reasons games are expensive is because of low supply. Obviously, demand plays a huge role as well. But here's the problem with expensive games. Their notoriety for being expensive becomes a part of their identity, to the point where when discussing the game, the question becomes, is this game worth it? As opposed to the more simple question of, is this game good or not? This leads to these games being almost unfairly judged in a certain way. And because of this, they often just get ignored because they're not worth the money investment for most individuals. And sure, a lot of these games are available digitally or through emulation, but the more plausible options there are for playing a game, the more people there will be who have played it. Personally, I prefer to play my games on original hardware. I know that obviously not everyone is like this, but there's definitely others like me. In the case of some games like the Sega Saturn games I mentioned, the games remain niche because they're so expensive in the second-hand market. This is a bummer because it's limiting the scope of what retro gaming is. I understand that not every retro game can be available at stores like Target, but the preservation of these games is up to collectors, and it's unfortunate that not every retro gamer can play every game they have interest in. It's not just about collectors hanging on to the physical copies of these games so that they aren't lost to time. People need to have actually played these games so that they have knowledge of what they are and how they fit into the bigger picture of gaming's history. For example, let's take this game for the Sega Saturn, Panzer Dragoon Saga. Sounds like pretty serious stuff, right? Well, this game is considered one of the best games of all time. Yeah, like out of all video games. But the only way you can really play it is by having an original Saturn system and a copy of the game, which costs hundreds of dollars on eBay nowadays. Let me put this into context to emphasize how crazy this is. Let's take the original Star Wars trilogy. These movies certainly have a fan base. Now, imagine if the only way to watch these movies was by tracking down a VHS tape that cost $700 on eBay. That's insane, right? And what's crazier is if that were the case, nobody would really know what these movies are because nobody would be willing to spend that kind of money to watch them. So yeah, it's about preservation. That's why I believe collectors when they say that they wish as many people as possible could play a certain game. When you've found something great, you want to share it and have everybody get the chance to experience it. A big part of the joy of retro gaming is being able to share the joy for games that you love. I mean, that's why I made this YouTube channel. Anyways, that's how I see it, but as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on expensive games. So let everybody know down in the comments, and I will see ya in the next video.